Okay, firstly, it's guys, just a quick introduction of myself. My name is Akhil. I lead the technology team at Krunch. Uh, a little bit of background about Crunch before I get into my talk. We're a company, a young startup based out of Hong Kong. We're a data analytics platform ourselves, and we're specifically focused at the DevRels. We sort of help. We focus at two aims through our platform. We help DevRels measure the impact of the activity they're having on their community, and we help DevRels take the feedback uh, back to the management and to the project team and sort of showcase to them what value they're creating for the company and how they're aligned with the company goals. So we started Crunch a few years ago, and that's what got me really interested in measuring everything that we do and measuring the response of the community as well. And one of the key things for us is for what we are coming out with is APIs. So I thought I'd do my talk on understanding how do we exactly go about um, measuring how well APIs perform among our community. But before I get into that, I just want to thank Atsushi and the entire team for organizing DevRel Asia. It's really incredible to be part of it, to be honest. And I can imagine the long hours that would have gone into organizing this. So thank you so much, guys, for setting this up. It's a great platform to exchange ideas and meet new people online. And of course, we couldn't have it offline due to COVID, but it's still fantastic. Um, Now, sort of onto with my talk. What I'm going to be talking about today. Like I said, it's looking at the key experience indicators, which allow us to measure the feedback from our community for the APIs that we've published. Now, knowing our community's opinion is everything to the success of our APIs, and I feel this is something anyone can use for better understanding your community. And for this purpose, we've chosen the Google Heart framework. Um, it's so what is the Google Heart framework? It's a framework created to help sort of track two main things: the quality of your user experience and the feedback you can take back to your product team. It consists primarily of five parts. The first is happiness, engagement. Third is adoption. Fourth is retention, and the fifth is task success. So you can say these are the five pillars which help us measure uh, our community's response to our APIs and just exactly how successful they are. They also help us in turn improve our product, and we'll see that later in the presentation. Um, every team who wishes to leverage the Google Heart framework, of course, has the freedom to track and choose specifically which pillars they wish to track their activities on, because not all pillars are relevant to all kinds of teams and the products. So you have to be very picky and choosy. I mean, just for example, if you have an API which is mandatory for somebody to consume, then perhaps tracking engagement won't make a great deal of sense, primarily because they'll anyways be engaging with it. But tracking happiness of using that API will make a lot of sense, because just because it's mandatory to consume, they should also actually be really happy using your API. So jumping into it, let's start with happiness. What is happiness all about? So when we talk about happiness in the context of our APIs or our API product, it's referring to how pleasurable, joyful, or satisfying the user experience has been using it. It's a metrics that can't be measured at your end. It's something that has to be measured at the user's end. Um, this is really the first step. Measuring the happiness of your user is really the first step to understanding their response and behavior towards your APIs. However, you also have to be really careful when measuring happiness. You don't want to catch your user on a bad day. Your API might throw a legitimate error or two, but the users, if they're having a bad day, you're going to get a bad response. So you have to be a little bit careful when you're measuring the happiness. But it's really about how pleasurable, joyful, easy it is to use your APIs. So next, let's focus on why do you need to measure it in context with your APIs. So I mean, I feel it's essential to measure happiness because it helps us understand the user's attitude towards our product. It helps us identify the strengths and weaknesses of our APIs, and helps us also get better understanding of specific features, feature level, and what's the right solution that we need to implement.
Sorry,
And
Akhil. Just want to check, is your slide on static, or
yes,
just want to
Paul.
check is your presentation is
Yeah.
correct?
So this is the fourth slide right now. I've just changed it. Can you see it?
No, I think we are stuck on the first page.
Oh, I'm sorry. That's something wrong there. Let me reshare it.
Okay.
Just a moment. Okay, I hope. Sorry, I did not realize the slide wasn't changing there. I hope you can see the updated slide now. So yeah, as I was saying, how do you actually go about measuring happiness? So one of the things is scoring. How do you score happiness? So there's indirect way to measure happiness, and you can use. There's a lot of tools online that you can measure happiness. Usually, a simple yes and no is a very good indicator whether what's your happiness level of your users. For example, asking, "Hey, have you recommended my product to somebody in the last month?" And if they come back with a yes, then I think they're quite happy with your product. But if they come back with a perhaps a no, then maybe they're not so happy. Another way to look at how do you measure happiness is perhaps by breaking your number of users down in three categories. So happy, unhappy, and undecided. Um, how that works is that when you do a small survey, every happy user who comes back to you with a positive response, you award them 1 point. Every unhappy user who comes back to you with an unhappy response, you award them 0 points, and every sort of undecided user gets zero point 0.5 points, half a point basically. And so what you do is, suppose you have 20 users and you have 10 users who are undecided. So that's 5 points. You have five happy users. So that's 5 points. And you have five unhappy users. So out of a possible 20 points, you've scored around 10 points so far, which means you only have 50% satisfied users so far. Ideally, you want to keep pushing this so it's all the way up to 80-90% of your users who are happy. So you can measure happiness quite easily. It's just it's just about focusing on improving how happy your users are continuously. So once you've measured your happiness, how does this help us improve? um, the way I see it is, you need to you need to measure your APIs slightly differently. You need to look at your mature APIs and your new APIs. So ideally for your mature APIs, you should be looking at around 90% satisfaction level. And for your new APIs, you should be looking for around 70% satisfaction level among your users. And you should probably be setting your goals for measuring happiness once every 4 weeks, because remember, happiness is an emotion, and you want to change it and contain it. And and it has to be observed over time. You can't observe it on a weekly basis. You need to give a little bit of time to your users to really understand and have an impact. The metrics, uh, once you've sort of understood over time how your happiness is changing, it also allows you to focus on the user base and the specific parts of your APIs that are bringing greater return and making your users most happy. The next part of this of the heart framework is engagement. So as you can imagine, we work from the left to the right. We've done H, which is happiness. Next is engagement. So let's just quickly go through what exactly is engagement and why measure it, and how do we go about measuring it afterwards. So in context of APIs, we refer to engagement as usage of each API being consumed by users. Engagement also covers the number of APIs being used over a period of time. So really, it's specifically more looking over a period of time. How is the engagement with our APIs? And why exactly do we need to measure it? It reveals two really important factors. Why do we need to measure it? Because we need to know how much our users really need our APIs, and what is the depth of their usage. And once we understand why they really need it and what's the depth of their usage, how exactly what's the best way to measure it? Firstly, the way I look at it is that you want to be able to see the number of active users on your day one of your publishing your APIs, the number of active users on day 7, and a number of active users on day 30. And you need to define the core APIs that are most important to you to see what function it's delivering to your users and what's their engagement with your core APIs. And finally, another method of perhaps tracking your APIs, the engagement with your APIs, is to see the time it takes between using multiple APIs, between using the same API over and over again by your user. And ideally, what you want to do is to be able to reduce the time how frequently people are using your APIs, so to ensure that the engagement goes up. So once you've got happiness measured, once you've got your engagement measured, another way of looking how successful your API product is to look at adoption. Now, in context of our APIs, adoption is the point where the users start to use your APIs in your production environment and not in the sandbox, which is where they usually start. Why should you be measuring it? Once the user has adopted your APIs by measuring it, you can understand whether the API is providing the value to the user. It's also a great way to validate the API and the solution it's providing. If the users start adopting your API, it's a clear vote of confidence that the APIs are addressing the problems and they're solving it as well. Now, what's the best way, perhaps, to measure adoption? So it's quite simple. Ideally, adoption it's the total number of users that are using a specific API, again, at given different time frames. Ideally, it allows us to calculate the adoption rate. And now, how do you calculate the adoption rate? The adoption rate is the number of users on any given day against the total number of users who have perhaps signed up. So at the end of January, at the beginning of January, perhaps you had 100 users using your APIs, and perhaps by the end of January, you had another 25 new users who have come on. So you've grown another 25% there. So you've improved your adoption rate by another 25%. But we're not talking about retention here. So we're not going to be looking at the first 100 users. We're looking at the new 25 users, but we will come to retention later on. One of the other parameters I feel that helps us measure adoption is time to first use. This is effectively referring to the amount of time taken by users to use your APIs, specific APIs, for the first time, or for the existing users to use a new API. You really ideally want to be able to reduce both the times. So when a new user comes on and they are looking for a specific function from your API, you want them to start using it quite quickly. You want them, ideally give them access to sandbox, and it should be very easy and straightforward for them to use it, so they can then move to production. Or if you're publishing a new API for existing users, the time to use that API should be as less as possible. So these two help us define the adoption of the APIs among all our users. It also helps the teams who are responsible for adoption in setting their targets for different APIs for different set of users, because it really clarifies who's using what. It also allows you to, if you can very clearly understand your adoption of your APIs, you can also start to point out what are the critical revenue generating APIs where you need to ensure your adoption rates are high and you maintain them. Next up is retention, which is perhaps equally important as adoption, if not more. So the user retention of your APIs show the continued usage of your API product. But we need to clearly define exactly what counts as retention. We need to define the key APIs and the repeated usage of those as retention, because certain APIs will carry lesser value over others, and you need to define a certain weightage for each API, and you need to ensure that the retention of the higher weightage APIs is the meaningful retention, and and of the lesser weightage ones it's not really bringing much value back to the company. And ideally, why we ought to measure retention. So, as I said, it's one of the key metrics that defines the success of your APIs. We need to measure it because it's a clear indicator whether your product is finally market fit and people will pay for it. If you're able to retain users if you're able to retain users for your APIs, that means it's solving a problem that's affecting them today, and they want to come back and use it over and over again because you've done a really clean job with your solution. So how do we measure it? There's three ways to look at it. There's retention rate, there's upgrade rate, and there's the mean time to churn. So let's look at each one of them. So first let's look at retention rate. To calculate retention rate, we need to look at two numbers specifically: the number of users at the beginning of a specific time frame and the number of users still using the product at the end of that time frame. So let's take a small example. For example, you had 100 users on 1st of Feb, and you had 90 of those users still continue to use your APIs at the end of Feb. So now you've got around 90% of the users you've retained and about 10% that you've actually lost. So calculating retention rate is quite straightforward, but it's the one that you need to calculate routinely to ensure that you can keep a track of how the retention is for a given API. The next thing you need to look at is the upgrade rate. Now, upgrade rate is something where we measure how many people who are using your APIs, who are paying for it, are moving from tier 1 of your subscription, if you like, to tier 2 of your subscription from month on month. Upgrade rate is also a great, of course, it's a great indicator that the new solutions you're publishing, perhaps, or extending your existing solutions are really hitting the mark, which is why people are willing to upgrade their subscription and pay a little bit more. So it really helps to track your upgrade rate. And the final matrix to measure API retention is the average time to churn. This helps define users who have stopped using your APIs or have downgraded. And you need to identify what are these pain points. Why are users downgrading from their subscriptions, or why are they altogether stopping to use a certain API? And why exactly must we do this? So identifying it identifies exactly what the users value, and it also identifies what exactly the users do not value. Once you know what the users value, you know where to invest your time and effort. And once you know what the users do not value, you can start sort of discarding those things. This will form, understanding retention is really important because it forms the cornerstone to the success of your API product. And finally, the business is running on top of these products. So it's really important to understand retention of your APIs, understand where you're losing users, where you're gaining users, and what's making them jump from one level to another in their subscriptions. Next up is task success, and that's the last pillar of the HEART framework when it comes to measuring how your community or your users are responding to your APIs that you've published. Now, task success refers to two things. It refers to the effectiveness and the efficiency of your APIs. How would one define these two? So the way I look at it is efficiency is defined by the time it taken to do a given task, and effectiveness is number of the completed tasks done using your solution. So why should we measure it? Ideally, because measuring effectiveness and efficiency of your APIs give a great insight into user experience, which in turn affects the retention of your users, which we just talked about. So how do I go about measuring task success? So task success can be measured through two means: the task success rate and on-time tasks. Task success rate, so let's look at task success rate first. This measures the success of a task that the user is trying to do using your APIs. For example, if different people are using different set of APIs, and suppose for the first API, 70% of the users are able to complete their tasks. Using the second API, 80% of the people are able to complete their tasks, and using the third API, 90% of the users are able to complete their tasks, because each API is performing a different function and you need to sort of measure how many people are able to complete their tasks when they use their API. If 100% are able to complete, then excellent. If not, then that's okay. But suppose for the example, if the breakdown is something like 70, 80, and 90, then on an average, around 80% of your users are able to complete their tasks using the APIs. So you then want to understand, okay, why with the first API only 70% of my users were able to complete their tasks, and unlike the third API where 90% of my users were able to complete their tasks, why couldn't 100% of them complete their tasks? What happened to the 10% who couldn't complete their tasks? So that talks about task success rate. And the second way to measure task success is to look at the time on task. This is the time taken by the user to complete the task using your API. So for each API, how long does it take the user to meet their goals? You need to measure this time and aim to reduce it. If you're able to reduce it, it's directly going to feed into the happiness element of your measurement, because we all love our ability to able to finish our tasks in a very swift and quick fashion, and you need to continuously make the user's life a little bit easier and improve their task success, the time on task. So those are the 5 pillars of the HEART framework that allow you to continuously measure your users' acceptance of your APIs and the usage of your APIs. They also, very importantly, highlight the pain areas to ensure that you can address them early enough and not lose any users throughout the journey. And that brings me to the end of my presentation. I will be publishing this through my Twitter account, so you can grab it there if you want, and you can reach out to me through my email or through Twitter. And yeah, I look forward to hearing from you guys.
Thank you, Akhil. It's great to hear your talk. Just one question. What is your favorite API then? What gave you the most happiness so far? Which API, if you had to choose one?
That's a difficult one, Jordan. There are so many of them. No, but if I often enjoy experimenting with some open source APIs, so you can find a vast list of open source APIs. So there's one which you hit and it'll throw back interesting pictures of animals. It's just random pictures of dogs and cats. So it's there on GitHub. I'll put it on my Twitter after the talk. I can't remember exactly which one it is, but yeah, that's a very interesting one.
All right. Thank you so much, Akhil. And we will move on to the next speaker very soon. So everyone else, stay tuned.
Yeah, thank you guys. Thank you.